In this video, I'll show you an example of a type of email delivery we call intelligent email delivery. The purpose of an intelligent email delivery is to take the results of a bursted report, let's say bursting by state or city, and then deliver each resulting personalized report to the appropriate email recipient. So before we build our burst, let's first look at the prerequisite for this particular type of email delivery. So we're bursting and then we're emailing. So this workflow requires a data source that contains two key pieces of information. In this example, I'll be using a database data source or database query, but any tabular data source will work for this particular workflow, be it an Excel file or an InfoBurst multi-column list, any data source with columns. So I have a table that contains the information I need to conduct my intelligent email delivery. So here in my database connection, I've written a query, a simple query to pull back data from this table. And if we run the query and look at the results, we can see that the query returns a column containing state values, and we will be bursting a state report where the values that we will use to burst will come from this column, so 4 states. And then for the delivery, the table contains an email column where each row contains an email address for the appropriate state report. So once we have our data source in place, we can then build our burst. So let's create a new burst and call this intelligent email delivery. And then we'll add our report. I'll be working with a web intelligence report called performance by state. And we will be bursting this report. This report does have a parameter for state, so we will burst on the parameter. As you can see, we have the default value listed here, but we're going to burst using the list of values from our database query. So we'll select data source and then find the query. This is our connection, and here's our state's email query. And the column to use here is state. And select apply. So that's the input side of this burst. Now let's look at the output or the delivery. We'll add a new delivery. I like to give my deliveries a name. I'll call this HTML email because I'll be delivering the report content as HTML inline to email recipients, but this could be PDF or Excel or whatever format you prefer. Our destination is email inbox, and you can provide custom file names if you like. We won't here because it's inline HTML. Now the key to the intelligent email delivery is use of the email column in our data source. Now here where it says email, you would normally enter an email address and then add that to the list of email addresses. But instead of entering an email address, we're going to insert a placeholder, if you will, that represents the email column in our data source. So if we go over here to our macro builder button and open the macro builder, you can see under the data section all the different data elements that are available to us in the macro builder. And you can see that one of them is email. This is the name of the column in our database table. InfoBurst knows about this column because when we applied the query as our source for our parameter, InfoBurst looks at and stores information about all other columns in that table so that they can be used in other parts of our burst. So here we're going to use that extra column called email for our delivery. So we can see this forms our extra column macro for email, %email, and we'll simply add that as the preferred macro. So instead of entering an email address, we're entering a placeholder where at delivery time, InfoBurst will go to the data source with a particular state value, find the email address for that value, queue up the email, and then repeat for all values in the list. So we'll simply add our macro as the recipient, and then I will change my format here to HTML and select add. And we're done. Let's execute and look at the result. Now we had 4 state values in our data source, so we see 4 refreshes. And then here we'll look at some detail in the activity log, which is the lookup. So InfoBurst will, once the bursting, the refreshing for state values is complete, will then go back to the data source and look up an email address based on a particular value. So for the first value, it found the email address for Brian. The second value, it finds an email address for John, and so on and so forth. So that's how that works. All the sends were successful. Let's look at the result in our mail client. So in this mail client, I've set up 4 different email boxes to see the delivery to 4 different recipients. So if I do a send and receive here, we can see for the Brian mailbox, Brian received just the California slice of that state performance report. And again, this was rendered inline, so we can see the report content, the tables, the charts right there in the email message. This particular Webby report had multiple report tabs, so we see each of those tabs rendered. We have the summary tab, the detail tab, and I think we have a margin tab, all for just state California as defined in our data source. Our next recipient is John. He received just the Florida slice of that same report. And then the same for the other mailboxes. We have Paul received New York, and recipient Steve received state Texas. So that is intelligent email delivery using a tabular data source.